My mom gave everyone gifts at Christmas dinner. Except me. 2 weeks later, she was begging at my door. I'm Archer, 33 male, and I want to establish something before this story goes anywhere complicated. I'm not a person who nurses wounds. I'm a commercial real estate broker in Phoenix, Arizona. I close deals, I read contracts carefully. I don't make decisions based on how I'm feeling in a given moment. I make them based on what the facts support. I've been that way since I was old enough to understand that being that way was the only reliable protection available to me in the specific family I grew up in. So when I tell you that I sat at a Christmas dinner table surrounded by 12 family members, watched my mother distribute wrapped gifts to every single person in the room, and understood with complete clarity that the empty space in front of me was not an oversight, I want you to know that I processed that information the way I process everything. I cataloged it. I let the dinner finish. I drove home. And I made a decision about what came next that I had been, whether I knew it or not, preparing to make for about 9 years. 2 weeks later, she was on my doorstep with a folder, a story, and an expression I had never seen on her face before in my 33 years. I'm going to tell you everything, but you need the structure first. My mother had 3 children. My older sister, who is 4 years ahead of me, my younger brother, who is 2 years behind, and me, the middle one, which in my family translated to the one who had figured out independence fastest and therefore required the least management and therefore received the least attention. I don't say that with resentment anymore. It's just the organizational logic of how our household ran, stated plainly. My father left when I was 9. Not a dramatic departure. He was simply, over the course of about 18 months, present less and less, until one day he wasn't present at all. My mother managed the aftermath of that departure by redistributing her emotional resources in a way that made sense to her. My sister, the oldest, became her confidant and ally. My brother, the youngest, became her protected one. I became the capable one, which meant I was largely left to be capable on my own. She was not a neglectful mother in the visible sense. She fed us, clothed us, showed up to school events, said the right things when the right things were required. But there was a hierarchy of investment in her emotional attention that was as consistent as weather, and I occupied the bottom tier of that hierarchy with a regularity that I stopped questioning sometime around 13 and simply began organizing my life around. My sister benefited most visibly. College was funded, her wedding was substantially supported, her house down payment was assisted with a $30,000 contribution from my mother when she was 28. My brother received similar treatment, his college, his car at 17, a $25,000 loan that became a gift somewhere in the accounting so when he was 25 and struggling after a business attempt that failed. My college was loans, scholarships, and a real estate license I got at 19. And used to work part-time while I finished my degree. My first apartment was mine. My first car purchase at 22 was mine. I never asked my mother for money because asking had never felt like something available to me, and by the time I was old enough to articulate why, I'd already built a life that didn't need it. I'm telling you this so you understand the context of the Christmas table. It wasn't an isolated moment. It was the latest and clearest expression of a pattern that had been running for 33 years. What made Christmas different from every previous expression of that pattern was that it happened in front of an audience. 12 people. In a room with overhead lighting and no convenient exits. My mother hosted Christmas every year. It was her event, her production, her gathering. She was good at it. The house was always arranged with care. The food was genuine and abundant. The extended family came from 3 different cities because her hospitality was real, and the event was comfortable if you were one of the people for whom the event was designed. I had attended every Christmas for 33 years. Not because the dynamic made it pleasant, but because my grandmother, my mother's mother, who passed when I was 29, had been present at them for the first 29, and her presence had been the anchor that made everything worth the drive. After she passed, I kept coming because habit and obligation have their own gravity. This Christmas, the most recent one, There were 12 people at the table. My mother, my sister and her husband, my brother and his wife, 3 cousins with a partner, my aunt and me. 13 if you count the chair my grandmother used to sit in that my mother still sat with a setting as a gesture I'd always found genuinely moving. The gifts appeared after dinner. My mother brought them out from the back room in 2 trips, wrapped packages, a variety of sizes, distributed with the warmth and purposefulness of someone who had thought carefully about each one. She handed them around the table one by one. Cousin, cousin's partner, aunt, sister, sister's husband, brother, brother's wife, other cousin, me. She sat back down. I waited. I thought perhaps there was a second batch. A separate trip. A timing thing. There was no second trip. She picked up her wineglass and asked my aunt about her flight home on the 27th. 12 people received gifts. 1 did not. I was the one. Here is what I want to be clear about. My mother did not forget me. Forgetting requires an absence of thought, and the specific way she sat back down, the deliberateness of it, the studied quality of immediately redirecting to a conversation with my aunt, told me that she was very aware of what she'd done. It had been a decision. Quiet, deniable, executed in front of 11 witnesses. I sat with my empty place setting for the rest of the evening. I participated in the conversations required of me. I helped clear the dishes. I said goodbye to everyone with the warmth that family goodbyes require. I hugged my mother. She hugged me back with the specific briefness of someone who was hoping the evening concluded without incident. I drove home. I sat in my apartment for about an hour. Then I made 3 calls. The first was to my accountant. The second was to my real estate attorney. The third was to a locksmith, which will make sense in a minute. Let me give you the background you need to understand those calls. 9 years ago, when I was 24 and newly licensed as a commercial real estate broker, my mother came to me with a situation. She owned a piece of commercial property, a small strip mall in a suburb of Phoenix, that my grandfather had purchased in the 1980s, and that she'd inherited when he passed. The property had 3 tenants, generated modest income, and had appreciated considerably since the 1980s purchase price. She had been managing it herself, loosely, in the way non-professionals manage properties, reactively, without a formal system, without a property management agreement. She asked me to take it over. Not as a paid professional engagement, as a family arrangement. She said she trusted me, that I understood real estate, and that having someone in the family handle it would keep everything simpler. I agreed. I was 24, I was grateful for the practical experience, and I was operating with the standard young person hope that family gestures would be received and remembered. I managed the property for 9 years. I renegotiated 2 tenant leases at above market rates, handled 2 maintenance crises that would have cost significantly more without professional coordination, brought in a new anchor tenant when the largest space turned over, and grew the property's annual net operating income from approximately $67,000 to $114,000 across the 9-year period. I charged her nothing. I tracked everything. I maintained meticulous records because meticulous records are how I operate. The property, based on a cap rate valuation at current Hanoi, was worth approximately $1.9 million. When my grandfather had purchased it, the price was $180,000. My mother knew I was managing it. She received the income distributions monthly into her bank account. We spoke about it perhaps 4 times a year, brief, functional conversations about lease renewals or maintenance items. She thanked me occasionally, not effusively, but occasionally. There was no formal property management agreement between us, no signed document, no fee arrangement, no written acknowledgement of my role or my contribution to the property's performance improvement. 9 years of professional grade work on a nearly $2 million asset, documented extensively in my own records, invisible in any document that bore her signature. My attorney, when I'd floated questions to her about this situation 18 months prior during a general portfolio review, had noted that without a written agreement, My position was that of an uncompensated volunteer, rather than a professional with documented claims. She had recommended formalizing the arrangement. I had deferred, telling myself it would create awkwardness. The Christmas table ended my deferral. Let me tell you about the 3 calls in order. The accountant call was to pull together the full 9-year record of my management activity, every lease negotiation, every maintenance coordination, every tenant communication, every improvement in the property's income position that could be traced to specific actions I had taken. My accountant had been maintaining these records on my instruction throughout the engagement because I had always tracked my professional activity regardless of whether a formal fee arrangement existed. By the time I called him the night of Christmas, we had 9 years of detailed work product. He spent 3 days reconstructing a formal management fee equivalent, what a professional property management company would have charged for the scope of work I had performed. Standard commercial property management fees in the Phoenix market run between 4% and 8% of gross collected rents, with additional fees for lease negotiation, tenant acquisition, and major maintenance coordination. Applying market rate fees to 9 years of documented activity, my accountant calculated a figure of approximately $187,000 in unpaid management compensation, not including the quantifiable value add of the NOI improvement I'd driven. This number was not a legal claim in itself. The absence of a formal agreement was the same problem my attorney had identified 18 months ago. But it was a documented figure that described what my 9 years of unpaid work had been worth in market terms. The attorney call was to ask her one specific question. Did I have any legitimate path to compensation given the absence of a written agreement? She walked me through the options. Quantum meruit, a legal doctrine allowing compensation for services rendered without a formal contract, when the other party has received and accepted the benefit of those services, was potentially viable in Arizona. Under Arizona contract law, a party who performs services that another party accepts and benefits from can seek reasonable compensation even in the absence of a written agreement, provided the services were rendered with an expectation of compensation rather than as a pure gift. The challenge was demonstrating that expectation. She also flagged something I hadn't fully thought through. The property management arrangement, while undocumented between me and my mother, was visible in the public record in specific ways. My name appeared on correspondence with tenants. The lease agreements I had negotiated had been signed with my brokerage as the representing party, with my mother as the owner. The maintenance contracts I had coordinated had been executed under my professional license. 9 years of activity had left a documented professional footprint that was entirely inconsistent with the characterization of a family member helping out informally. You have a viable quantum meruit claim, she said. It won't be fast and it won't be certain, but the record is strong. The locksmith call was different. My mother had given me a key to the property 9 years ago for management access. A copy of the master key for the strip mall. I had used it throughout the 9 years, for inspections, for tenant access issues, for maintenance coordination. It lived on my key ring. I called a locksmith to make a copy of the master key, sealed and documented before I did anything else. Not for any improper purpose. The key was still legitimately mine to hold as the person actively managing the property, but I wanted a documented copy in secure storage before anything else moved. Then I drafted a letter. Not to my mother, to her. The letter was 5 pages. My attorney reviewed it before I sent it. It described in formal and specific terms the 9 years of property management services I had provided, the documented work product, the market rate fee equivalent my accountant had calculated, and my intention to seek compensation for those services through appropriate legal channels if a voluntary resolution could not be reached. It also formally notified her that I was withdrawing from the property management role immediately, that she should arrange replacement management, and that I would cooperate with any transition to a new manager in an orderly way. The letter was sent certified mail, return receipt. It arrived at her house on a Wednesday. I know this because the tracking notification came to my phone at 10:47 a.m. She called me at 11:03 a.m. I let it go to voicemail. She left a message that I saved. The message said, essentially, that she didn't understand why I was doing this, that the letter had frightened her, and that she wanted to talk. I did not call back that day. She called again Thursday. I let it go to voicemail. She called Friday. I let it go to voicemail. On Saturday, 12 days after Christmas, 2 weeks and a day, I heard a knock at my apartment door at 9:30 in the morning. It was my mother, with a folder. She was standing in my doorway in a way I hadn't seen her stand before. Not the managed, directed posture she used in social settings, the posture of someone who had made calculations and arrived at a presentation. This was different. The folder was in both hands. She looked like a person who had spent 12 days running through options and had arrived at a door as the conclusion of that process. "Can I come in?" she said. I let her in. Not because I'd resolved anything, because I had been raised with a certain code about hospitality, and old habits are structurally load-bearing. She sat at my kitchen table. I sat across from her. I did not offer coffee. The absence of the coffee offer was something she noticed. I could see her register it, and it told her the conversation was going to be conducted differently than our usual ones. "The letter scared me," she said. "I know," I said. "You're planning to sue me." "I'm planning to seek appropriate compensation for 9 years of professional work," I said. "Whether that requires a lawsuit depends on whether we can reach a voluntary resolution." "You've been helping the family." "I've been managing a commercial real estate asset," I said, "with my professional license. For 9 years. Without compensation." "I thought you were doing it as family." "I thought a lot of things about how this family operated," I said. "And then I sat at your Christmas table and watched you distribute gifts to 11 people." The folder was still in her hands. She hadn't opened it. "That was—" She stopped. "I know what it was," I said. "I don't need you to explain it. I'm telling you why the letter came when it did." She set the folder on the table. It had documents in it. I could see the edges. I didn't reach for it. "I need to tell you something," she said. "Okay," I said. "The property." She paused. "There's a developer who has approached me about buying it. He's been in contact for about 4 months." I kept my expression neutral. "He's offering $2.4 million, she said. I knew the property was worth around $1.9 million by cap rate valuation. A $2.4 million offer, if real, was above market and suggested the developer had a specific use case driving the premium. "Show me the offer," I said. She opened the folder. The letter of intent was there, from a regional development group that I recognized as active in that Phoenix suburb. The LOI was real, professionally formatted, and the $2.4 million figure was on the page. "He wants to move fast," she said. "He wants to close in 60 days. "What does that have to do with me?" I said. She looked at me. "He found out you were managing the property. He wants you involved in the sales side. He said the lease documentation and the property records were the cleanest he'd seen on a non-institutional asset in years. He said whoever had been managing this had done professional grade work and he wanted that person in the transaction." I processed that for a moment. "He asked for you by name," she said. "He looked up the lease agreements and found your brokerage license." I thought about 9 years of meticulous records. Tenant files organized by lease date. Maintenance logs with dated invoices. Rent rolls going back to the first month. I had maintained them because I maintained things carefully, not because I had anticipated a moment like this. But they had been there. Accumulating. Waiting. "What are you asking me?" I said. "I want you to represent the sale," she said. "As the listing broker, the commission on a $2.4 million sale would be between $60,000 and $96,000 depending on the split," I said. "Yes, I know what it would be." "I want you to have it," she said. "All of it. I'll instruct the developer to work with you exclusively." I looked at her across the table. She had come to my door with a folder. She had driven to my apartment, which she had never done in the 9 years I'd lived there. She had sat at my table and told me, in the vocabulary of someone who had been calculating their position for 12 days, what she was willing to put on the table. The commission was real and it was significant. But I had an attorney's letter in process and a 9-year accounting and a quantum merit claim that could exceed the commission figure depending on how the litigation went. I wasn't going to trade one for the other without clarity. I want 2 things, I said. First, a written property management agreement, backdated to the actual start of the engagement 9 years ago, acknowledging the professional nature of the work and the value delivered. My accountant's fee equivalent documentation gets attached as an exhibit, not because I'm going to sue you, but because 9 years of work deserves to exist on paper. She was quiet. Second, I want to represent the sale as your exclusive listing broker at standard commission. And I want a written acknowledgement from you that the commission is in addition to, not in place of, the management compensation record, so that if at any future point we have any dispute, the record is clear. She looked at the folder. She looked at the table. She looked at me. And the lawsuit, she said? I'm not interested in suing you, I said. I'm interested in a relationship that operates honestly going forward. The letter was the beginning of that. This conversation is the continuation. She picked up the folder. She straightened the documents that didn't need straightening. She was running through something in her head. I could see the calculation, and after a long moment she arrived somewhere. Okay, she said. Okay to both, I said. Okay to both, she said. The management agreement was drafted by my attorney and signed within 2 weeks. The exhibit attached to it was my accountant's 9-year fee calculation, $187,000 in market rate equivalent fees. The agreement did not require my mother to pay that figure. It required her to formally acknowledge it as the documented record of what had been contributed. That acknowledgement was the thing I needed, not the money. The record needed to exist. The sale listing was executed simultaneously. I represented my mother as the listing broker on the $2.4 million sale of the strip mall. The developer was motivated and professional, and the transaction closed in 58 days. My commission was $84,000. The developer's agent split the standard 4%, and I received 2% as the seller's representative. The paperwork was clean because the underlying property documentation was impeccable. 3 different people involved in the transaction commented on the quality of the property records. I did not explain the 9 years of unpaid work that produced them. I just processed the commission check and filed the closed transaction. I want to tell you about the Christmas conversation because it happened and it belongs in this account. 3 weeks after she left my apartment with the signed listing agreement, my mother called me. Not about the property. She called on a Sunday morning, which was the call time she used for non-transactional things. I want to talk about Christmas, she said. Okay, I said. She was quiet for a moment in a way that told me she had prepared something and was deciding whether to lead with it or set it aside and rebuild. I didn't give you a gift, she said. No, I said. I've been doing a version of that for a long time, she said. Not always with gifts, but with attention. With the things you give people that aren't objects. I waited. I told myself you didn't need it, she said. That you were fine. That you'd always been fine. And I let it become an excuse. It was an excuse, I said. Not harshly, as a fact. I know, she said. I'm not asking you to forgive it right now. I'm telling you I know. I thought about 9 years of property management. I thought about the Christmas table. I thought about the $187,000 fee equivalent sitting in an exhibit attached to a legal document in my attorney's office. And I thought about what I actually wanted from this relationship, not the accounting which was already handled, but the thing underneath the accounting that the accounting had been standing in for. I'd like to try to build something different, I said. Not because the history doesn't exist, because I'm 33 and I'd rather have a real relationship with you than spend the next 30 years in the same pattern. "I'd like that too," she said. "Then show me," I said. "Not in one conversation. Over time." She said she would try. I believed her in the specific way I believe people when they say they'll try, which is partially, provisionally, contingent on what the trying actually looks like. The sale closed 4 months ago. My mother is working with a professional property management company now for any remaining assets. We have dinner once a month, started 2 months after the closing, her suggestion, which I noted as evidence of the trying. She brought me something at the first dinner. Wrapped, she placed it next to my plate without saying anything about it. I opened it. It was a copy of a photo I hadn't seen, and me at about 7 years old, at a family picnic, in the specific unselfconscious way children exist before they understand they're being observed. Someone had taken it. My grandmother probably. My mother had found it and had it printed. I took it home and put it on my desk next to the one from my graduation. The commission check is invested. The management agreement is filed. The quantum Merowit letter is closed. The photo is on my desk. That last one cost the most to get and took the longest to arrive, and unlike the rest of it, there's no dollar figure I can put on it. Okay, I need the comments to weigh in on this specific moment. Your mom distributes Christmas gifts to 11 people at the table, sits back down, picks up her wine glass, and starts a conversation with your aunt like the empty space in front of you doesn't exist. At what point in that dinner do you say something out loud versus what I did, which was sit there for the rest of the evening, drive home, and call an accountant at 9 o'clock at night? Because I've had people tell me I should have said something right there at the table, and I've had people tell me the accountant call was the better move. I want to know where you draw that line. And if you've ever had someone show up at your door with a folder after spending years showing up to nothing, tell me about it in the comments. And if you've ever been the capable one, who somehow ended up managing everything, contributing everything, and receiving the empty place setting, subscribe. We tell those stories here, with the commission checks, the signed agreements, and exactly one photo that arrived 26 years late.